Now, Slim is a PHP micro framework that helps you quickly write simple yet powerful web applications and APIs. Now, this is a pretty powerful framework, so we're going to dive right in because it's slim, it's quick, it's easy, it doesn't need much overview. So we're going to use Composer, and we're going to create a project using the slim/slim skeleton, and then we're going to call it Slim. So Composer create project slim. Alright, so I'm going to let that install and then we'll come back. Okay, so now that's installed, let's cd into Slim. Then we're going to go back to the slimframework.com. We're going to scroll down and we're going to go and start a simple web server. Let's copy that, go back to our terminal, let's paste that in. That's going to start a PHP server at localhost 8080. And once that is up, let's copy this over and let's see if it worked. Yep, and it worked. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to this public/index.php file. Now, originally it's going to look like this. We're actually going to move all of this stuff to a file called index.original.php, and then our index.php we're going to start from scratch so we can cover everything. Now, the first thing we need to do, if you're in PHP 7.4 or newer, you need to declare your strict types as true. Now that references class property strict types. If you want to learn more about that, I have a PHP 7.4 series on that where we cover class property types. The next thing we want to do is we want to require our vendor file. And we're just going to copy this code right here, and we're going to require that. That will auto-load our auto-loaded files, which is defined in composer.json. So your composer.json has these auto-load, and that allows for namespaces, that allows for just auto-loading files instead of having to do include everywhere. So next we're actually going to create our app. To do this, first we need to import the app factory. And so we're going to import that, and then we're going to do app equals app factory static create. After that, we want to create our first route. To do this, we are going to import the request interface. Then we're going to import the response interface. After we have those imported within our index.php, then we can do app, right below app create, we want to do app get function, and then this function, and here we'll actually print it out so you don't have to watch it, is going to accept the request interface. We're going to do as request, and the response interface as response. Request, response is going to get the name argument from the URL. Then it's going to response, as our response, it's going to get the body and write hello name, which is the name argument from the URL. Then it's going to return the response. The final step is we actually need to run our app. So to do this, we just need to do run app, and it's just going to be app run. So just like this, app run. And that will actually allow our app to run. Now if we go back to our website or URL or localhost 8080, we go hello and then pass in Zach as the name. Hello Zach. It properly works. So I want to bring you guys to the Slim Framework concepts, and one of the concepts it goes over is the application lifecycle. First, we instantiate the Slim app. We use the factory to do this. Next, we can define our route definitions. Well, we defined one route definition. But just like any other PHP framework or application, we can always define post routes, just like this, etc., etc. We can define put routes, we can define delete routes, patch routes, head routes, and option routes. So you can define any of those routes or routing types or verbs within your route definitions. So we don't have to stick with app.get or app.get. We can find any route verb. We're probably going to try to stick to as simple as possible so we can cover all the concepts, but I wanted you guys to be aware we can add additional verbs. Okay, so next let's talk about setting up debugging. So let's say we go to a route that doesn't exist. We'll do hello Zach test. We get this ugly error, can't really understand what it means. So we can add this global middleware. We'll go over middleware here in a second. But it's called add error middleware. Display error details, yes. Log errors, yes. Log error details, no. So by adding this, we're saying, okay, before we ever hit the route, we have to go through this middleware. This middleware is responsible for catching the errors, or more specifically for when errors are caught, for displaying the errors and logging the errors. So now if we reload this page, we get this more, I guess, beautified error application page. It has the details, what the exception is, the given code thrown, the message, there is none found, where it happened on line 91 within routing middleware, and then it has the debug stack trace. So all we have to do to set up debugging in the Slim framework is app add error middleware, true, true, false. And we have to do this before we ever hit our routes. What is middleware? Well, middleware allows you to run code before and after your Slim application to manipulate the request and response objects as you see fit. Why would you want to do this? Well, perhaps you want to protect your app from cross-site request forgery. Maybe you want to authenticate users or requests specifically, not even users, before your app runs. Middleware is perfect for these scenarios. So what is middleware? Well, first, it accepts two parameters, the server request interface and the request handler interface. This is the PSR7 request object and the PSR15 request handler object. Each middleware should invoke the next middleware and pass it request and response object as arguments. So how does middleware work? Well, imagine it as the gateway, as the gatekeeper into your application. Now you can have several gatekeepers, each responsible for a different thing. You make several different middleware to control who is allowed to access, what is allowed to access your Slim application, what you want to do with the response, what you want to do with the request. You can do this before your app starts and after your app has executed. How do we write middleware? Well, let's scroll down here and let's just go to our, let's just do it this way first. Let's do before middleware and after middleware. We're simply going to copy these two functions. We're going to put this before our add error middleware. Now notice there is a new response. This means we can't use our response alias. We can't alias our interface as response. So let's remove this and let's do just response interface, and let's return or replace request with request interface to keep everything consistent. Let's do request interface. Let's do response interface. Okay. Now let's go back to Slim. Let's see exactly what we need to import. Scroll back up here. We're going to do new response. So we need to import the PSR7 response. And then we need to import the request handler, which is the request handler interface. Okay, so we have that, and let's put that down there. And let's actually just make this just request handler interface to keep it consistent. Okay, so now we have that, and we have everything set up properly. After we have our middleware set up properly and the interfaces and classes it depends on, the middleware depends on set up properly, let's add the middleware to our app. Add before middleware and add after middleware. Just like that. Now let's go back to our app, and I've already reloaded the page here, but you'll notice that now we have before, hello Zach, after. And that is because within our before middleware we did getBody right before existing content, getBody right after. So that has properly worked. So next, let's refactor a little bit. Our index.php is getting a little crowded, so let's copy the example before middleware, and we're going to refactor this middleware to its own class. So let's go to Source, Application, Middleware. We're going to add a new PHP class called Example Before Middleware, just like that. Next, let's just go right here and just set it up like that. Server request, and we'll just do as request handler. Okay. Next, let's add a new class. We're going to call this new PHP class example after middleware. Now, how is this working? Well, it's using this magic invoke function. And all invoke is it lets you do something like example after middleware. And whenever you do new example after middleware, you can create a function. It will, whenever you pass the request and the handler, it will automatically call this. So whenever you try to run a method on an instance of a class, and that method, you're not naming that method, you're just using the parentheses right away. So you could do like middleware equals example after middleware, and then you could do new. Then you could just do middleware, and then it acts as like an invocable or callable function. You can just do middleware request handler. So that's all invoke does. It's just a magic method. So then after we do that, let's go back to index.php. Let's remove before and after middleware, and let's use, I believe it's going to be app/middleware, just like that. Set example after middleware and example before middleware. We factored that to put this at the bottom, and then all we need to do is do example after middleware class and example before middleware class. And if we go back, now we can remove the request handler interface and the response. And if we go back here and we reload our page, everything works the exact same. So all we did was refactor the middleware into its own class. Alright, so now that we have added global middleware, let's figure out how to add route-specific middleware. For example, we create a new route and we say, okay, user, and then we do that, and we return the exact same thing, whatever. Then we go back here and we just go user Zach or user Tim. Well, we have before, hello, Tim, after. But what if we just want to run the hello and if we just want to run the example after middleware and the example before middleware on a specific route? To do that, we can add, and then we have to do new example after middleware, and then add new example before middleware. Just like that. Then we just have to remove these from right there. And if we go back to our browser, Tim does not have the before and after middleware. But if we go back to hello, well, this route does. Hello, Zach does have it, but user Tim does not have the middleware. So that's how you make route-specific middleware instead of global middleware, is you just add it fluently to the end of the route definition you want the middleware to be executed on. Okay, so our index.php file is starting to get a little crowded. So how can we refactor this so we're registering things like routes or middleware as services? Well, let's start by doing this. Let's refactor this app directory, and let's do original app directory. This comes with the Slim skeleton download. Let's create our new directory, and let's call this app. Next, let's create two files. First is going to be route.php, and this is going to return a function that implements the Slim app. Use Slim app. and it is going to accept the Slim app, not implement it. Okay. So let's copy this over, and let's create a new middleware that's going to do the same thing. PHP, and then because we are in PHP 7.4 or newer, we have to declare strict types as true as well. And let's go back to routes, declare strict types as true. Okay. Next, let's grab this global middleware, and let's put this right into the middleware callback function. Simple as that. Then let's refactor these right here, and we're going to make these global middleware again just for the sake of the example and to clean things up a little bit verbosity wise. So app add, and then we're going to do example before middleware class, and we're going to take this and use it, and then use after middleware, just like that, effect that, and then we're going to do app add example after middleware class, just like that. And then we're going to semicolon the ends of both of those lines, and we're going to do this. Okay. So now if we go back to our index.php, we have gotten rid of our middleware on the routes, but now we have no middleware. So to use the middleware, all we have to do is we have to require our directory path dot slash app slash middleware.php. Then we have to say, okay, middleware equals that function that we are returning, because we are returning a function that accepts an instance of the Slim app. After that, we can simply just pass in our app to the middleware function. Sweet, easy as that. Okay, so now to prove that everything still works, we can see our middleware still works. Now it works on every page again. So next, let's do the same thing with our routes. So let's just take these routes, let's go here, and let's just add our routes there. And then we can get rid of this example interface, or example middleware, and we can get rid of this route request and response, and we can use it within our callback. Finally, we need to come back here, and we need to do routes equals require directory dot slash app slash routes.php, and then we need to do routes and then pass in our app so we can register our routes. So all this is doing is it's returning a function that accepts an instance of our app, and then it's just doing what we were doing in our index.php, but now allows us to kind of partition it out into almost services in a way, but I'm almost hesitant to use that word because we're going to go into the service container next. So that's how to clean up your index.php and use things as more of a, hesitantly said, service layout. Next, we're going to go over adding a dependency container to our Slim Framework application. So the first thing is that this is completely optional. The dependency container does not need to be added, but in most applications that reach a certain point, above what I would consider small, you'd want one. And they're pretty easy to set up in Slim. The biggest thing they allow for is they manage your dependencies in a single place, so you're not consistently or constantly having to add new with all the dependencies that you need to pass from the constructor, and they allow for dependency injection. So to get this set up, the first thing we need to do is we need to go to our index.php and we need to use di/container, just like that. We need to do container equals new container, just like that, and then we need to do app factory set container as the container. So just as a simple example, set container on app, let's do this. Let's add a new settings directory or file. So first thing is we're going to declare strict types as true. Then we're going to do use di/container, just like that. And we're going to return a function that accepts the container, and then it's going to do this. Next, we'll just do this. Container set settings, and then we're going to set our settings here. Okay. Next, let's just do this. Let's copy this up here. And we're going to do app/settings. We're going to do settings, and instead of passing in our app to settings, we want to pass in our container to settings, because the container accepts the container, whereas middleware and routes accept the app. So next, let's look at what we're setting in our settings. Well, the key is settings, and then we are setting the name of our application, whether we want our display errors details, our log error details, or our log errors. So let's copy these right here, and let's go to our middleware. So notice that these display error details, log error details, and log errors actually line up with our add error middleware. So we can do app get container, and then we can do get settings, just like that. We're going to do settings equals that, then we're going to do settings, and then that's going to be setting display error details, setting. Okay, then if we go back, since we got our settings right there and we're setting these dynamically, just like that, let's go back to our application. Let's hit a route that doesn't exist. DI container not found. Okay, so we imported the DI container incorrect. I'm guessing that's just DI container. So we imported it there, and then we imported it here. And there we go. Our Slim application errors still work properly. But now, if we want to set these to false in here, just like that, then we reload. Now it doesn't. So let's set these all back to true. And that is a simple example of how we can set and get services from our container. Normally what we do in our container is we would new up whatever we want to depend on, and that way whenever we need to get an instance, we don't have to say new user with, I don't know, new email, new foo, new fo, whatever. We do that in one place, and then anywhere else we need to get it, we can do container.get settings or get user service or whatever we want to call it, and that way we don't have to do new every time we need that new service. So that manages our dependencies by just putting our dependencies in a single place, and we don't have to reference them again. Instead, we can reference the key that maps and automatically calls everything we need to create that service. Alright, so next let's set up a logger. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add the logger settings to our settings. So let's do this. Let's use our monolog /logger, just like that. And we're going to call the logger Slim app. The path is going to be to the directory with logs, and it's going to be to app.log. After that, we need to add a new logger service. So this logger service is going to obviously be a PHP file. We need to declare our strict types. Now I'm actually going to copy and paste this in. So what we're doing is we are passing in our container as usual. Then we are setting the logger based on the logger interface class. Now the logger interface class abides by the PSR, which is just basically PHP best practices, logger interface. It accepts the container interface, which our DI container is an implementation of that container interface. Next we get our settings, and then we get our logger settings. And so we can actually do this. Let's just do logger. And so now our settings are our logger settings. And we can do this because we're in the logger service provider. So after that, we do settings equals container get settings logger, and then we do logger equals new logger based on the settings name, the processor for the logger, so the thing that actually processes the log, and then the stream handler, the path, which we defined in the settings, the level, which is debug, which we defined in the settings, and then we push the handler to our logger. If you want to learn more about how to set up the loggers, it's kind of outside the scope of this tutorial, but if you want to learn more about loggers, look into Monolog. Monolog is, I believe, the most popular PHP logger, and that's what we're using. Okay, so then after that, we're actually, just because I'm not sure which level of logs that Slim automatically throws, we're going to actually demand that we log right after we register the service. We're actually going to call it and use it. So once we have all that set up, we need to go back to our index.php and add our logger below settings. Then, if we reload our page just like this, we get app.log and context message unique ID. So that's how you add a logger. Okay, so by default, we don't get any templating engine or the ability to add views. But you are able to configure the Slim framework with views or templating engines such as Twig. So to do that, we first need to install this package. Composer requires slim/twig view. Okay, so once we have that package installed, we can go to our settings and we're going to add views array. And that is going to have the path to our view templates or our Twig templates, which we are going to store in this new directory called views. We'll just make a new example.twig file. This is just going to be h1 with the name. Simple example. Okay. So create the views directory, add your example.twig, and then add in your settings a view associative array with the path that points to the views directory, and then the actual Twig settings, which we're just going to set cache as false, so we don't have to mess with that right now. Now that we have our settings set up, we are going to add a new views.php service. So the first thing is first add PHP, declare strict types as true, and then this is going to be a callback function. So check this. We're importing our Slim app, our Slim views, the Twig implementation, Slim views Twig middleware, the Twig loader, or the file system Twig loader. Okay, so we depend on these three things to get this to correctly work. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our container from our app. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set our view key. And this is going to get the setting views first, and then it's going to create a new file system loader or a new path loader from our settings path. Now our settings path is referencing the path to our views or our Twig templates. After that, we want to create a new Twig using the loader and the settings, which are our views settings. After that, we want to set our view middleware. Now the view middleware needs to have the app and the container. Using the container, we are going to get the view, which we set here, which is just the new Twig, the loader, and the settings for when we load Twig templates. So after that, we also want to pass in this little nifty thing, which is a route collector or the route parser. So we want to return the new middleware. Okay, so the next step is we want to add our routes that actually need to use the views. So to do this, we are going to come over here and we're going to first get our container. Our container is going to be resolved from our app using app get container. Next, we're going to add an app group. Now the app group is going to have no patterns, so just any routes in here, these are the ones that need to return a view. Now the reason we're putting this in a group is because we're actually going to add our view middleware, which we defined right here. Set view middleware, well that's the Twig middleware. So in our routes, we're going to group all of the routes that require a view so we can get the view middleware or attach the view middleware only to the routes that are views. Next, we need to actually import this route collector proxy. So use route collector proxy, just like this. Just like that. Once we have our route collector proxy brought in, I'm actually going to change this from group to view, just so it's a little more declarative. View get view's name request response. So what's going on here? Well, first, let's just make a new one. We're going to get an example, and then we're going to pass in or bind name as the parameter. Next, we're calling our callback function just like a traditional route. Because it is a traditional route. We're just saying, hey, we want to group. This is a route group. And we want to group all of our views into a single group so we can apply a middleware, which is the view middleware, again, defined right here, which is the Twig middleware. We want to apply this middleware only on all our views. We don't want to apply it globally. We don't want to apply it on a single route. We want to apply it on a group of routes. So we add a route group. Now, next we need to define our template, which is going to reference example.twig. Again, source views twig, example.twig. After that, we want to get our name from our arguments passed in. The name is binded to the URL parameter, just like that. And then we want to return this get view. This references the container. Within a route, the route can access the container using this. So this get view, which references the Twig instance, the Twig with the loader and the settings. So this get view, and then we want to render the response using the example twig.view. So let's get rid of that. And then we want to compact name. Now compact, we'll do this. Name equals name is the same as compact name. So all we're saying is, okay, get the name variable and make it an associative array. So that's what we're doing when we say compact. Once we have set up all of our routes in our route group with the specific view middleware, we need to go back to our index.php and we need to actually add views equals require directory app views and pass in our app instance so our views properly run. So after that, we need to actually should work. So if we go back here and we go example Sarah, we reload our page, it's H1, which is pretty cool. So what if we went to our example.twig and we did H2 and we did subtitle, or even better yet, Slim Twig integration. Template engine Twig integration. Then we did like HR, and then we did style equals H2, and then we did color equals, I don't know, dark olive green. It's not going to look pretty, but we're not really here to learn about templating. Then we reload our page, and we properly load our CSS, our H1, and our H2. So guys, that's how you properly integrate Twig with the PHP Slim Framework. Alright, so next, and actually the last thing we're going to do today is going to be adding a database connection and interacting with that database. So the first thing we need to do, since we downloaded the Slim skeleton at the very beginning, we have this Docker compose. Now, I'm going to post this entire repository to Git, and I'll link in the description, so you can find this code within that Git repository I will link to. That is going to be in the Docker compose file. We added the DB, which is going to use MySQL, and we added phpMyAdmin for actually interacting and viewing MySQL. Once we're done doing that, we can go back to our Slim repo, just the root of our repo, and we can do Docker compose up. Now this will do three things. It will boot up the actual database, MySQL. It will boot up phpMyAdmin so we can interact with that database through an interface, and it will boot up Slim at the 0000 port 8080 point. So if we go back here, and once that is booted up, we should be able to, okay, there we go. And so I already logged in, it looks like, but your login is going to be defined here. So MySQL username equals user, MySQL root password equals secret. DB is defined here. The database name is DB. The user is user. The MySQL password is secret. The root password is also secret. And then you can access those ports through 3306. And we're also exposing 3306. So again, the phpMyAdmin username is user, the phpMyAdmin password is secret, and then here's your database name, user, user password, and root password. Okay, so once we have our phpMyAdmin and the MySQL database set up, we need to do a couple of things. First thing is we need to go to our settings.php. We need to add the connection information. So the host, which is SlimDB1, the database name, which is DB, database user, the database password. Now, these are all defined either in our terminal when we do docker compose up. You can see starting SlimDB1, starting Slim1, Slim phpMyAdmin 1. So we can either get the host from there, and then we can get the database name, database user, and database password from our docker compose.yaml. Okay, so next we need to actually install PDO. Now this will take place in 2 steps. The first step is we need to go here, we need to do composer require extension PDO. And that will actually load the PDO into our composer. While that's installing, we need to actually go back to our Docker Compose, and we're going to replace PHP 7 Alpine. Whoop. And it looks like I missed into my dashboard. And we're going to replace it with this, which is, I don't know how to pronounce that name, but PHP 7 Alpine with a few extra PHP extensions. And that's going to be Daijay PHP 7 Alpine? I don't know. But basically, this is PHP 7 Alpine, but it also has the PDO extension for our .ini file within our PHP. Okay, so that is installed. Now we want to do docker compose up. Okay, so while that is booting up, let's go back here, and we're going to add a new connection.php service. So as the usual, we are going to declare strict types just like that, and then we are going to use our di/container and return a function that accepts the container like that. And then we're going to go down there, and we are going to add this code right here. So all we're going to do is we are going to container set connection, just like that. So we're creating a new service. The key is going to be connection, is going to be function, and we're going to use our container, just like that. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to get our settings for our connection. So that's going to be the host, the database name, the database user, and the database password. So connection. Next, we're going to set our host, database name, database user, and database password based on those connection settings. And then finally, we are going to connect to our PDO, or to our MySQL using PDO. Now, PDO is an abstraction around our MySQL database to keep it really simple. And all we have to do is add this code in. MySQL host equals host, database name equals database name, database user equals database user, and database password equals database password. After that, we're going to copy in some custom attributes or settings for our PDO, error mode and the error mode exception. And then we're going to do catch, and then we're going to do, if that doesn't connect properly, we're going to throw a new exception. And that new exception is going to echo connection failed with error message or error get message. Then we're going to return our connection. Okay, so once we have that set up, we of course need to go back to our public index.php, and we need to go right below settings, and we need to do connection equals required directory dot slash app slash connection.php, add our semicolon, and we're going to do connection to our container, just like that. Alright, so now that that is created, let's actually test and insert. Let's create a table and insert let's make it a users table. So let's do table equals container get settings. Then we're going to do connection, and then we're going to do db name, just like that. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to wrap this in a bracket, and then we're going to do dot users. So that is our table. So that's going to end up looking like db.users, and that's the table we want to create. Okay, so after that, we need to actually create our SQL query, or let's just make our columns right now. And we're going to do columns equals, let's go ID varchar 11 not null auto increments. Then we're going to do name equals varchar. That's going to be 15. Actually, that's going to be an integer. Let's do 55 not null, and then we're going to do email varchar 55 not null. And actually, we want email and name to be like that. Next, we want to do container.get connection execute create table if not exists. We want to do table columns, just like that. Okay, so after that, we want to do we want to make our SQL query. So we want to do SQL equals insert into table, and then we want to do what would that be? That would be name, email, and then values equals Jules and Julia at cleancode.studio, just like that. Okay, so we had a syntax here. So primary key does not have an underscore, auto increment does, and then if we go here to columns, columns actually needs parentheses around it, just like that. So now with any luck, this should work properly. So to test this out, we can go here and reload our page, insert it into users, name, email, values. So if we log in to root as secret, we go to users, Jules at Clean Code Studio was properly inserted. So there we go, guys. That is how you connect a database to the to your Slim framework. So just to review on everything we've covered today, we covered creating routes, we covered creating route groups, we covered creating loggers, we covered middleware, we covered creating a service container, resolving services such as settings or routes from that service container. We covered how to properly connect to a database. We covered how to set up phpMyAdmin so we could actually look into that database. And we covered how to set up a templating engine for Slim. So we covered quite a bit of information today. But this is a pretty cool framework, guys. It's pretty powerful. And the biggest thing, it's slim, it's fast, and they follow best practices. So I hope it was helpful. If you guys want to see anything else with the Slim framework, let me know. I don't have any plans to add any more videos, but if enough people are interested, I'm definitely up for diving into the Slim framework a little bit more. So as always, guys, if you learned anything useful, if this was helpful, if this was intuitive and easy enough to follow, or you just learned something cool like how to use Docker Compose and automatically set up PHP and MySQL and PHPMyAdmin, Like and subscribe, guys, and I'll keep them coming. Appreciate it, guys.
Simpler.